Suchitra, thank you so much for taking time to talk with me today about your Oscar-nominated film, Anuja. Congratulations on the Oscar nomination, especially for your first film. How have you been taking in this recognition?
Well, thank you, Daniel. First off, thanks for having us. Really appreciate it. You want to say?
No, I mean it's been overwhelming and just amazing. It's been this sort of snowball effect of just, people. We made this scrappy film, low budget, our own money, a little bit of money from his
Mostly,
brother.
mostly Amex money.
Yeah, mostly to the credit card, and then to have it kind of go this far is just, of course, like everyone, a dream come true. So,
Yeah, I
add
mean,
to that.
honestly, we weren't sure if this film would be, watched by maybe my parents and my in-laws, and then to have it on Netflix now and to have, all this outpour of like just that, like so much support and love that this film and these incredible performances is receiving. It's heartwarming. So.
It's amazing. Well, if I'm not mistaken, like I said, this is your first film. Adam, I understand you're a professor of philosophy. So, Chitra, you're an accomplished artist. What propelled you on this filmmaking journey to max out the MXs? What propelled you on this journey?
Well, I should say that I did shoot a short. I did shoot right before Anuja. I shot a film. She was a producer on that as well. We shot a film in our living room. So if you count that, it's our second.
Okay, perfect.
It's really the first film that we really spent time on, and I've been obsessed with cinema since as a child. I think everybody, whether you write about film, you're a filmmaker or what, since I was 4, I was taking my dirt bike across town to, sneak into the theaters for the afternoon or whatever. So it's always been film and philosophy have always been my kind of my two loves. And, I use film a lot in the classroom as a kind of heuristic device, but then also I think of film as quite frankly a medium worth kind of investigating philosophically to begin with. And so I always knew I wanted to make something. I didn't know when that was going to happen. I thought retirement, but then the pandemic hit, and I don't know. I think the pandemic had this impact on a lot of people that it just kind of refocused my priorities and what I want to do. So yeah, we were literally driving home from Dairy Queen, which is one of the only like fast food places that was open during like pandemic. And I just was like, hey,
Well, we also love Dairy Queen.
yeah, yeah, I grew up in the Midwest. Okay. So I got definitely a soft spot for soft serve Dairy Queen. But the thing is, I was like, I just finished a book. So I'm like, I'm going to write a screenplay. And I figured she'd be like, oh, don't be crazy. We've got family to feed. But instead she was incredibly supportive and we just embarked on it together. So.
Yeah, I think like for me, I've also always been, excited about film, not as much of a film nerd as Adam, but in my practice, it's all about sharing the work. And I feel like sometimes visual art, that world can be sort of exclusive in a way. And film is just so not. It's so accessible. And I think for me, we've always kind of talked about possibly making a film together or embarking on this journey. And it just felt like the right time. And I feel like a lot of the themes like that I'm interested in, giving voice to women and telling stories that haven't been told, et cetera. It just feels like the right platform for that.
Mm. Well, let's talk about the film itself. Tell me where the idea for this specific film originated and telling a story about this specific culture and child labor and those sorts of themes.
Well, I think that's a very long story. It goes back about 27 years because I have a background in South Asian studies. I lived off and on in India for many years and studied Sanskrit at the Banaras Hindu University, did my undergraduate degree in South Asian studies and then wrote a master's thesis. But along that kind of path, we met in a seminar in medieval Hindu temple architecture, but kind of obscure. But the thing is, this particular film really grows out of the themes of Suchitra's art practice in some ways. I was developing let me just back up and say that do you want to talk about that though yourself? I don't want to speak for your art practice.
Of course. I'm from Guyana, and so my family a couple generations ago are from India, brought to Guyana by the British as indentured laborers. And so this, I spent a lot of time researching the history of indentured labor, specifically in the Caribbean and in, northern Latin America. And I think that throughout my work, there's kind of an honoring of ancestry, a kind of delving into storytelling and in those ways. And so labor and gender have always been at the heart of my practice. And so this feels definitely like an extension and a
And
collaboration with Adam on, thinking about these themes.
and we were thinking about doing a coming of age,
Yeah.
we were writing like a coming of age script, and it was still very vague and where we were going to go with it. And we were coming out of the pandemic. There was a lot of discussion for the first time about supply chains in the press. And all that press was focusing on like why we can't as consumers get the goods that we want. And we of course were kind of a little bit more focused on the other end of the supply chain. We were doing more research on that at the time, reading scholarship, quite frankly, about the labor conditions in the garment sector in particular. And then Suchitra came across this really crazy statistic, sad statistic, that 1 out of 10 children globally, not in India, but globally, 1 out of every 10 kids is engaged in child labor. And that struck us as like, we have kids. That struck us as like an incredibly high statistic. And so then I reached out to friends and my contacts in Delhi, and very quickly were put in touch with nonprofits who provide opportunities for kids who are either previously working or still working. And we started doing site visits. We started reading case studies, and we just realized that this was the setting, like this was the world that we felt hadn't been explored sufficiently, at least within the coming of age genre. And we felt that, when we first started thinking about doing a film on this subject, we thought, first off, as filmmaker, like, as somebody who's going to put resources into making a film and has the luxury and the rare privilege to do it, why not lend the camera to support an issue, to shed light on an issue that is of significance, right? And these are not kids who have the resources quite frankly, the resources to put together a film of this nature. So we, as much as we could, we really got buy-in from organizations and from the community itself in kind of developing the story. And we thought at first it was going to be a very dark, it's a dark subject, so we figured it'd be a fairly dark film. But as we got to know the girls more and just spend more time with them, it was just so clear that we had to pay tribute to their immense capacity for creating joy amidst these difficult circumstances. And there's something so spunky and they just sparkled, and we wanted to make sure that was captured on screen, and we wanted to make sure that we made a film that they would appreciate, that wasn't just for us, wasn't just for an Oscar audience, but was actually a gift and a tribute to them that they themselves would appreciate.
And I might add that, creating a platform as well for young actresses that are around the world, I think globally, is just something that isn't always done. So that is like something that was really important.
Yeah, that's the thing that I love about your film so much is like you said, there are tragic circumstances, dark circumstances, but this film is not a tragedy. And like the best coming of age stories, the kids are the heroes of this story. And so I love the tone of it. Tell me more about the writing process, how you came up with your main character, Anuja, and how this story really developed.
Well, like you said, the best coming of age stories are follow kids who are always smarter than the adults.
Yeah.
That's kind of the main key. And we knew that, it's also important that there are films about kids or people who are suffering, and we didn't want them to be defined by their victimhood, as just passive victims. Like, we want to make sure that we captured their agency, and that their agency kind of showed through. Elements of the story, I mean, I'll say this is a bit of a spoiler, but one of the things that we were absolutely convinced of from the very beginning, from reading case studies and talking to kids, it's far too common for girls in particular and their families to have to face this decision of whether to keep their girls, like, just have their girls going to school or have them working at home or working outside of the home, but to support the material conditions of their family. So families who live in abject poverty they struggle with this decision, and it's a real genuine decision that can't be trivialized. It's not simple. There's no silver bullet answer. We felt like it was we felt from the very beginning, in terms of the structure of the story, that it was important to shift that weight onto the audience's shoulders. If we could bring the audience to a position where they felt the immense kind of existential dread of making that decision, then we'd effectively succeeded as filmmakers. And so that was one important part of the kind of element of the story. And then the question was, how do you raise the stakes, right? And it's obviously, it's not a documentary. It's not based on a true story, even though Sajda Patan's own life history does parallel in many ways that of Anuja. It's a fiction, and it's designed, it's meant to be a work of art that expresses something about universal experience and something about childhood in general, not just, again, not just about child labor. Child labor just is the setting, because after all, 1 in 10 kids is engaged in a world similar to this. But we decided, we had to raise the stakes in such a way as to, we relied upon some kind of, fictional twists in order to kind of raise the stakes with the factory owner. And also there's like through lines of caste and class consciousness that kind of come through, that kind of play into all of this. I'll tell you the story about, again, these are spoilers, so I don't know how much we want to get into it, but like
Okay.
the story about, Palak, the older sister, sneaking the bags out of that's based on an old Soviet era joke about a factory where these guys are, checking they're checking the wheelbarrows coming out of the factory every night, and until it eventually dawns on them that what the factory workers are stealing are the wheelbarrows themselves. That's an old I think I read that in a book by Slavoj Žižek, the Slovenian philosopher, once, and I thought that would make so I all these great ideas are taken from somewhere, so that's where that came from. But as much as we could on set, we gave these girls the opportunity to really express themselves and let their own distinctive personalities shine through. So, we've always been amused by matrimonial ads in India, and I knew there were a lot of absurd ones. So I poured through, hundreds of matrimonial ads, picked out the funny ones, and then while we were filming that scene, Sajda was herself just learning to read for the first time. So we wrote them out in big bold marker, so she could actually read them, and then we kind of let them riff. I gave them a couple ideas for jokes or funny things that could, there are jokes in the script that are based on these matrimonial ads, but we really let them play with it, to kind of create that sense of authenticity on set.
I was going to add that, I mean, just to kind of support what you're saying, this idea of making the space in the creative process at large for this kind of like intuitive process to like reveal things that you would never have expected is just amazing. And I think you did that throughout the filming. And I feel like that kind of, it's just adding to the spontaneity and life of the film.
Yeah, and I assume all of these actors are non-professional actors. I don't know.
Not all.
Okay.
But I will say two things. One, Sajda remarkably had already been in a film.
Oh,
This
wow.
is not her first role.
Yeah.
In fact, when we cast her, she was on set playing a smaller part in a feature film called The Braid by a French director. She just about 8 months before we met her, she'd just been brought under the care of the Salam Balak Trust, so living in this residential center for girls that provides a space for girls who are either living on the streets or coming from vulnerable households and things. And she just immediately gravitated towards acting and had this just loved acting. And so she was actually on set. We were soliciting audition tapes from different nonprofits because we felt it was important to cast from the community as much as possible. And when we got hers, we're like, wow, this is just a raw talent. Ananya Shanbag, who plays Palak, the older sister, she'd never before been on screen. She never acted in anything, actually, on stage or on screen.
But she is a performer. She's a Bharatanatyam dancer, classical Indian dancer. And so, that form of dance has a lot of expression and theater within it. And so, we saw her self-tape and we were just like, whoa. So we were very lucky.
But the security guard in the factory, he was our rickshaw wala. So he was driving us around a rickshaw and he said, hey, my wife, we told him that we were there shooting a film. He said, my wife says I should be an actor. And we're like, what? You should be. And the woman who buys the bag from Anuja in the mall is actually someone who works with one of the nonprofits. And she just happened to be on on set that day. And I'm like, Sunita, would you be willing? And she just knocked it out of the park. So we had incredible luck.
Yeah.
Nagesh Bosley plays the factory owner. He's actually a well-established Marathi actor. He's done Bollywood. He was actually he was in Hotel Mumbai with Dave Patel, and he's a friend of mine. So he just flew in for an afternoon to help us out with the film and just knocked it out of the park. I mean, just knocked it out of the park. I knew he was perfect for it, So when I realized that I had a friend who was good friends, in fact, I was teaching at a university in Denver when we started developing the project. And I have a friend in the English department who teaches Bollywood film, and he'd hosted him on campus just like a year or two before. So yeah, it's just everything came together very organically and very scrappy little project put together by a group of basically a family and some friends.
Well, I think that energy works really well for the film itself. I think it comes together so well. And well, as a self-described film nerd, I would love to hear about inspirations that you had, whether maybe for the visuals of the film or the storytelling. What were some pieces that inspired you along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the coming of age stories that the obvious ones are like Satyajit Ray, of course, in the Apu trilogy, the first film in the Apu trilogy. Francois Truffaut. I mean, I love French New Wave. It's just and so Truffaut's Quatre Cents Coups is like a major precursor for this. Again, about kids who come from a scrappy background, but in that case, they are going to school and they're skipping out of school. So like slightly different story. But when they skip out of school, where do they go? Of course they go to the cinema, right? And there's no culture aside, like India is the one exception, I think, to this rule, right? There's no country or culture on earth that like appreciates film more than the French, except for India, like, and so I thought, when kids sneak out, when they have a day off from the factory or whatever, what are they going to do if they got some extra resources, a couple extra rupees? They're going to go to the cinema, right? And I didn't want him to go watch RRR. It needed to be like, classic Bollywood.
And somebody has asked us about that, and it's because we love classic Bollywood. So.
Yeah. And this is they call this parallel cinema in the Indian cinema. There's this parallel movement that's like there's like the big studio Bollywood productions, and there were films that were not exactly indie films, not like so arty, not Satyajit Ray like indie films, but they were kind of in between. So this is a kind of parallel. And Nayadur, where that piece is taken from, is a film that actually deals with labor. It's all about labor issues and the mechanization of certain labor practices in a village and how it puts people out of work. So it's kind of thematically connected. But then I'll be honest, I grew up like watching
Stand By Me.
Yeah, Stand By Me was the first R-rated film that my parents let me watch. Not the first one I've seen, but the first one they let me watch. And even Ferris Bueller's Day Off I've mentioned before, because like there's the scene in Ferris Bueller's Day Off where there's this what's the song? Who's the song by again? There's this beautiful song. They go to the museum, the Chicago Museum. What's it called? The
Institute.
The Institute. Yeah, the Institute of Art in Chicago, right? And Cameron's character stands in front of that picture, the pointillist picture, and the music is playing. And like, there's always the scene where, like in these coming of age films, where there's this moment of just energy, where it's like this cathartic moment of bonding between the kids, right? And so that scene is very much, I don't want to say it's an homage. It's just that this kind of, you need a moment in the film where you feel for a moment that you are like, you're the third member of this sibling bond, right? And I just feel like it's such a and nothing. I'm one of these people. I know in indie film like today, like beautiful scores are kind of a little passé, and people like, oh, too much beauty, whatever. I like, film is the one art form that appeals to all of our senses. And I'm a lover of music, and I'm quite frankly, some of my favorite music is film scores, whether it be like, Out of Africa, maybe it's a saccharine film, but I mean, listen to John Barry's score. Yeah. Just listen to John Barry's score. It's just so great. And of course, The Mission, River Runs Through It, Mark Isham's score. These are scores that they're rich. They're so rich. They contribute to the visuals. They somehow, the soul just kind of connects with them. It's all blended into one thing. And I felt like that's what we tried to do in that scene. We take classic Bollywood with the beautiful score that transitions, and you have this moment with the girls that's so intimate.
I think we both have a penchant for the Baroque. I'll just say.
Perhaps.
That's great. Well, as great as the movie is, it has continued to have an impact since its premiere as well. It received so much love in addition to the Oscar nomination, and support from stars coming aboard as executive producers: Mindy Kaling, Priyanka Chopra Jonas, and many others. And you're also using the film, I understand, as a launching pad for a social impact campaign. Tell me more about the impact that this film has already started to have, and that you hope it will continue to have.
Well, what our plan is to have through education in terms of the classroom, but also for adults, education about child labor, and also thinking about lobbying against child labor. We actually have partnered with one of our production producers, is they're from Shine Global, which they basically produce and support and actually sustain the
Social impact
social impact
campaigns
campaigns.
for films.
But basically, they're interested in films that show children's resilience. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
And so we're working with them to basically create curriculum and programming for schools and whatnot.
Child labor is one of the rare issues, actually. Like people, I think everyone's aware that child labor exists, of course. I don't think people are aware of the extent of it necessarily, but everyone's aware that it exists. But what I think film has the power to do is to connect us viscerally with those kids so we can actually feel the effect and the impact of this global economy on their lives. And awareness is one of these, child labor is one of these interesting issues where awareness itself is very powerful because the laws as written currently, like in the state of California, they're simply transparency laws. So companies can exploit kids all they want, but they have to publish and they have to publish they have to do transparency surveys and be open about what they're doing. Those surveys don't do anything if people don't care to read them or care to think about them. Mm-hmm. So awareness helps tremendously. Yeah. The other thing, of course, that we hope to do is raise funds for the Salam Balak Trust, which is the nonprofit that the NGO in Delhi, which operates homes for kids and kids who are either previously working or living on the streets. And that's where Sajda's living now. Yeah. And she's finally, engaged in formal education and she's caught up to grade level and all of that. And it's all thanks to the work that the Salam Balak Trust is doing. So we're really hoping to use the film also as a vehicle, quite frankly, to, the film isn't a public service announcement. It's not meant to be that. It's meant to be a piece of entertaining art. And we think it stands whatever, we think it holds as such, but if it can be used in this way, of course, that's more than icing on the cake, right? So Shine Global's good. They came on after we shot the film as well, and to kind of help structure the social impact campaign by basically getting it out into schools and other kind of it's so funny. We've been doing so many of these things. Our brains are fried for the terms, but like stakeholders, decision makers, these kinds of things. Yeah. So they put together educational materials and they have all like the facts and figures. We're not experts, we're not, social workers or social scientists, but we know that the film can be a catalyst for conversations about issues that matter. So
good. Well, yeah, I'm excited that the film is on Netflix so that it can reach a wider audience, and so excited for the Oscars coming up. One last question before I let you go. Adam, I've done a lot of interviews with filmmakers and artists, and you're the first professor of philosophy that I have interviewed. Of course, there are natural ways that philosophy and film or art of any kind intersect, of course. How do you see your experience in the academic world informing your work as a filmmaker as you move forward in this new career?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I mean, I think film allows me to explore themes, aspects, dimensions of human existence that, quite frankly, you can't quite grapple within the context of discursive conceptual thought. So it's kind of just a playground where human emotions and human experience can be explored. And I think every project I'm working on now, like whether it be screenplay, they each kind of, they're not I don't believe a film necessarily has to have a singular a theme that carries through it, but I think that film can explore different questions and themes. And so, um, you know, I'll just say that even in the context of Anuja, the final scene was very much influenced by my own work on within the context of the theory of agency, which is kind of a very arcane kind of little corner of academic philosophy. But the notion of a decision and what really makes a decision a genuine existential decision, it's the capacity or the incapacity to engage in calculative reasoning under certain conditions allows for the possibility of a genuine decision to be made. So in kind of thinking through the final scene, I was very much kind of relying upon some of my own philosophical work and my research in whether it be like post-structuralist thought, like Jacques Derrida's deconstructionism and things like of that nature. But yeah, I very much think that my work in philosophy and my work in film they go hand in hand, and I'd like to think that I have I love all genres of film, so I don't want to I'd like to make films that are very different from one another, as opposed to take someone like Wes Anderson, who's a brilliant filmmaker who won in this category last year. Of course, love Wes Anderson's films, whether it be The Royal Tenenbaums or Grand Budapest Hotel. Those are probably among my two favorites. Maybe Bottle Rocket, some of the earlier ones too. But the point is that they all have a very similar flavor, and that's they all call the Wes Anderson look, right? There's the joke about the LUT, and things. But my feeling is and I respect filmmakers who work like that. There are so many great filmmakers who have a kind of a very distinctive look. I see my own work, hopefully, if I'm so lucky enough, if I'm lucky enough to continue to work in this industry, creating very different films that may not be discernibly connected to one another, but each would have a kind of through line to the extent that they'd be informed by my own kind of philosophical interests.
Amazing. Do you have are you working on a feature?
I am. I have two feature screenplays that I'm just kind of starting to shop around. I've been really, to be honest, this whole Oscar thing keeps one quite busy. So I haven't I haven't had as much time as I would have liked to kind of pitch my projects. But I do hope that next year, by in the next coming months, I'll have more concrete plans for putting together a feature. But yeah, I have a feature. The one that I'm most excited about right now is it's a relationship between a father and a daughter who's living. It's about a father who goes in search of his daughter who's living with his estranged wife, and it's very much. I'm really interested in kind of family dynamics and in this, Anuja is very much about sibling relationships, and this would be very much parent-child relationships. So
amazing. Well, can't wait to see that. Can't wait to see whatever you both come up with next. I love it. Congratulations again on the Oscar nomination, and best of luck as we get closer to the Oscars.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Daniel. Really enjoyed your questions.
Yes,
Great questions. Really
Thank you both. Appreciate it.